as you'll know, the objective of these sessions is to explore the question of what a Plan S funding policy for open access books could or should look like. So we're going to have a series of 5 events over the next couple of months. And this first session is designed to introduce the series and to start thinking about the potential scope of such a policy. My name's Lucy Barnes, and I'm one of the coordinators of the Open Access Books Network. I'm also an editor at Open Book Publishers, which is an independent open access press based in Cambridge. And just a couple of housekeeping rules. So I mentioned if you could please keep yourselves on mute unless you need to speak. Also, just to say that I think we're going to be recording this first session, or this first part of the session rather. So if you'd rather not appear in the recording, then please turn your cameras off. So just to say a few words about the Open Access Books Network, which is hosting these events. The Open Access Books Network is a free open network, and it's available for anyone who's interested in or working on open access books in any capacity. It was founded by members of OOPEN, of Operus, of Scholar-Led, and of Spark Europe. And at the moment, it has 3 coordinators, which is me, Agata Morka, and Tom Mosters. And Agata and Tom are both taking part in the session today, so you'll see them at a later point in the session. And the purpose of the network is basically to share knowledge about open access books and to try and build a community of people who are working on them or interested in them in any way. And the link that I've shared there is our website. I think I can drop it into the chat as well. So you can go there if you want to find out more about us. Someone else drop it in the chat. Toby, would you mind dropping it in the chat? I can't find the button there for the chat. But that's the Open Access Books Network. So now onto the series of workshops that we've planned, and this is obviously, as I said, the first one. So the idea is that each workshop will look at a different aspect of this potential Plan S policy for open access books. So obviously you'll know of the Plan S policy as it exists for journals, devised by Coalition S, a group of funders in Europe. And the Coalition S intention is to have a Plan S policy as it applies to books by the end of this calendar year. So the aim of these workshops is to discuss different aspects of a potential Plan S policy, to produce some notes and videos that record our discussions and the different viewpoints of the community, and for that then to be able to be put forward to Coalition S as they consider a Plan S for books. And so the raw material, the notes and recordings will be available for them, and Spark Europe are going to take the material and they're going to synthesize it into a policy document for Coalition S to consider. So that's the kind of ultimate objective of these sessions. And we've broken them down into 5 different topic areas, which you can see there. We've got introduction and scope, which is today. Then we've got quality assurance and transparency on April the 13th. We've got green OA for books on April the 27th, discoverability and metadata on May the 11th, and rights retention and licensing on May the 25th. And you can see there, green OA for books is fully booked. But I'll explain as the session goes on how the materials from each session are going to be available on the Open Access Books Network for other people to look at, and also for other people to contribute to after the session. So if you're interested in any of these sessions and you haven't been able to get a ticket, or you can't make it because you're busy or whatever, there'll still be an opportunity for you to feed into that particular discussion via the network, and I'll explain that later. So the intention here is that we provide a platform basically for people to be able to share their views and perspectives on this question of what the scope of a Plan S policy for books should be. So in the first half, we're going to have some discussion with some speakers who we've invited, who I'll introduce shortly. And as those conversations are going on, you're very welcome to add questions in the chat box if you have anything that you'd like the speakers to address. Then in the second half, we're going to open it up. We're going to have breakout sessions, and you're then going to be able to be in small groups to discuss this question of the scope of a potential Plan S for books. And there'll be discussion in those sessions and note-taking in the breakout rooms. And as I said, those discussions and the notes from those discussions will feed into the Spark Europe policy proposal to Coalition S. So the people who are involved in the session today, I've introduced myself, I'm Lucy Barnes, and then we've got Agata Morka, who's the session leader. Agata is also one of the coordinators of the Open Access Books Network. Our speakers are Charles Watkinson of the University of Michigan Press, Elke of Open and the DOAB, and Dominic of Claxo. And we're very grateful to them for coming and for sharing their views with everybody. So that's the kind of the first half, as I said, and then the second half is the opportunity for everyone to give their views on these questions. And then we have 3 facilitators who are helping us, especially with the breakout room section. This is such a large group, that's going to be interesting. So we have Toby Steiner of COPIM, Tom Grady, also at COPIM, and Tom Mustard, who is another of the Open Access Books Network coordinators. And I'll get them to wave and say hello just before we start the breakout room session, so we'll know who they are. So today's session, we're going to break it down like this. Agata is going to give a kind of overview of current funder policies and how they relate to open access books. Then she's going to speak to Charles, Elke, and Dominic about the policies and about related questions. We're then going to have a 10-minute coffee break, screen break, stretch your legs break, before we come back to the main room, and then I'll run through how the breakout sessions are going to work. Then we'll dive into those. Everybody will discuss, write notes, and etc. Then we'll come back into the main room and we'll have a poll on the different formats for open access books, or the different book formats rather, and whether they should be in the scope of an open access book policy. Don't put too much weight on the poll. It's not intended to be the definitive word on any of these questions. All it is really is a way to kind of bring everyone together and to have a kind of very rough idea of where people are sort of sitting on the questions of different sort of book formats. And then finally, I'll wrap up and I will give you the links where everything's going to be stored, and also a few more links and information related to the Open Access Books Network in case that's something that you want to find out more about. So I think that is everything from me for now. So I'll hand over to Agata to talk about policies.
Thank you, Lucy. I will share my screen in a sec with you. So there we go. And off we go. Hopefully you can see everything. So first of all, I would like to also welcome everybody and thank you so much for coming. We did not expect so many people to come, to be honest. So we kind of feel like the Rolling Stones of open access here. So thank you again for joining us here. I will speak very shortly today, but just to kick it off, I would like to speak a little bit about the current landscape of OA book policies. So what is out there? How are these existing policies constructed? And in order to do so, I actually looked at quite a lot of documents with existing policies out there, but by no means is it any kind of exhaustive research here. So I would very much encourage the community here to actually also add to the document that I was putting together. It's an open document, it's linked here. The scope of my research was Europe and the UK. And I was looking at funders' policies. I left institutional policies out of scope for this particular exercise here. So as you can see, I looked at 66 funders from Europe and the UK, and a big variation of these funders, because we are talking here about, of course, some of the big ones like the Wellcome Trust or the Arcadia Fund or European Research Council. But at the same time, I also looked at some of the national funders, perhaps less known, coming from such countries as Lithuania or Slovenia, for example. So within this poll of 66 funders that I looked at, it turned out that 24 of them actually do have existing OA book policies. So if my math is correct, and it never is, it's about 1/3 of the group who actually has some kind of documented OA book policy in place. What I looked at first was the policy scope, and this is actually the theme also of our session here today. So perhaps this is one of the most important slides in this presentation. So I looked into what type of publications were actually in or out of the policy scope. And as you will see on all of these slides, actually there is one theme that is, well, it's a common thread here, that there's a lot of diversity. These policies are by no means uniformed. And especially when it comes to the policy scope, the way that they define what is in can be very different. So here you have several definitions that I encountered. So it varies from a very broad definition, like all publication resulting from funding from a certain funder. Then we also have options where all peer-reviewed scientific monographs are mentioned. Of course, we also have these distinctions between some policies mentioning OA monographs, some mentioning OA books, some mentioning academic books, some of them mentioning also anthologies or edited volumes, and also book chapters. So as you can see, it's not uniformed at all. We have many different ways of naming. I don't even know if the same things, perhaps not even the same things, because creators of these policies might have different definitions in mind when it comes to what they consider to be an academic book or an OA monograph. So many different options. When it comes to embargo periods, because that is also one of I would argue one of the most important parts of any policy, any open access policy. When it comes to embargo periods, this is a little bit more uniformed, I have to say. So I have not seen even one policy that would state more than 14 months, actually. So it varies from 0 embargo period, so immediate open access, 6 months maximum. This is more or less the most one of the most current occurrences when we look at these existing policies. There are also distinctions between embargo periods for SSH, which is usually longer, and for STM, which is shorter, which is usually 6 months. In some cases, these policies also mention that embargo periods are negotiable and they are flexible for books. And there are also quite a lot of cases where embargo periods are simply not specified. And this is this case of a certain component of a policy not being specified. We will see it in my further slides as well. When it comes to licensing, again, a big variety out there. CC BY required, so CC BY as a requirement does appear quite prominently. However, there are some policies that are, let's say, gentler than the others. So whereas some funders require CC BY, others just simply recommend it or suggest it. Other than CC BY, other licenses that are considered or that are mentioned most frequently are simply CC licenses, and they are defined as such without really specifying which one. Other policies also mention CC0 or CC BY SA. Again, also saying that it is preferred or encouraged for authors and institutions to retain copyright. And again, here we see the same case where in many cases, licensing is simply not specified in these policies. For self-archiving, I think that these not specified cases are the most frequent ones. So when I was looking at the policies, that was something that was quite striking, that many of them do not really say much about self-archiving or how it should be done. When it comes to repositories and when it comes to depositing your work in a repository, again, many cases where this is not specified. And we see some variation between when there are strict policies that require a deposit and some which simply recommend. But I would say that the question of repository and deposits, as well as self-archiving, these are the questions that are most frequently not specified in the existing policies. When it comes to the timing and deposit timing and the process, some of them called for immediate deposit upon publication. Some go a little bit further and allow some kind of delay there from 6 to 12 months. And again, with many cases where this issue is simply not specified. So as you could see from this very short overview of the existing policies, we can say that there is a big variation. There are some trends. There are some issues which are better defined than the others, but all in all, we see that there isn't one unified voice here. There is a variety of voices when it comes to these existing policies. And today here with all of you in the room, in the virtual room, we would like to ponder upon the question of how should we define the policy scope? So we wanted to start with this, and we would like to invite you to discuss this question with us. What kind of publications we would like to see within this possible policy for books within the Plan S? What should be in? Should we include OA books? Should we include OA monographs? Should we include all publications funded by a funder in question? We are more than curious to hear your views on these matters. And in order to start our discussion, we invited here today 3 special guests, and it is my great pleasure to start a discussion with you. So as Lucy mentioned in the introduction, we have Elke, we have Charles, and we have Dominic. A very interesting crowd because we have representatives from Europe, from the US, and from the Latin America, and that was exactly what we wanted to achieve here, to hear as many voices as possible from as many different backgrounds as possible. So I think that I will kick off the discussion here, and I will start with a question to Dominic first, if you don't mind, Dominic. So I wanted to ask you, in general, what do you think? What are the biggest potential risks of a Plan S for books? And what are the biggest opportunities or advantages?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Agata, for this invitation. The benefit of global conversation on the future of open access books is the possibility to have diversity of voices about how this future of open access books should be encouraged and promoted. The risk of Plan S is that it's an idea that was issued in Europe, where the big industry is located, which gives employment, which gives outrageous benefits and taxes to the governments. And we see that in open access of journals, Plan S has invited to the table the big publishers. So the risk is that we are pushing globally APCs, which will be unsustainable in developing regions, and it will mean we will not be able to publish. We will read, but we will not be able to publish. So I was hearing your very interesting introduction, and I think that in an open science context, where if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there's not one of these Sustainable Development Goals that does not need as much local as international voices. And the voices, the local voices, can be in diversity of publications. So in a global agenda, which could be Planes, or which could be UNESCO, which could be, we hope, an interoperable network of platforms, not one plan, a diversity of options, a diversity of plans, which work together and interoperate. There we could have more voices from other realities, but include diversity of formats, not only books, also monographs and preprints, and other preprints are more tied to journals, but we will have preprints of books, I hope soon also.
Great, thank you, Dominic. That's a great way of starting the discussion, I think, and also to give a certain perspective, which is outside of the usually Western sort of lenses of the academics here. Let me go to Charles with a similar question. Charles, what do you find to be the biggest challenge when trying to define a Plan S for books?
Yes, thank you, Agata, and thank you very much to you and Lucy for organizing this and for all your work on Open Access Books Network. I think the biggest challenge, and I'd agree with Dominique, and the biggest challenge is an assumption that authors or their institutions should cover or could cover publication fees for books. Even in the wealthy US, books have many authors who are either independent scholars or loosely affiliated with their institutions. And that's an increasing trend. These are precarious scholars who are often actually not eligible, even if they appear to have an institutional affiliation, they're not eligible for some of the funding that an institution may offer. So I think that is the real concern. I will say, I do also agree with Dominique on the advantages. I think the idea that books get to participate fully in the open science environment is really, really important. If they're currently being left behind, which may make the monograph increasingly irrelevant.
Perfect. Elke, would you like to add some European perspective to the mix?
Yes, thank you, Agatha. So, yeah, I think I agree with both Charles and Dominique. I think the biggest challenge is that we come up with a policy that doesn't work in different regions because it is too uniform or because it is geared at certain types of publishing. And we should be mindful of the diversity, because in book publishing, there is a much wider diversity in publishing practices and traditions in different countries than I think there is in journal publishing. So that is not looking at different disciplines, but simply at the publishing format. That there are many different ways to publish books, and I think we should respect those differences.
Absolutely, and thank you. And speaking about differences here, so in so many presentations about open access books, we hear again and again that books are different. Books are different from journals, and when you actually look at the existing policies, well, you will see that there is this sort of discrepancy between journals and books when it comes to coverage by these policies. So journals are almost always covered by open access policies, whereas with books, it's not always the case. Why do you think this discrepancy?
Is that to me, Agatha?
Whoever would like to go.
Well, so I think we already discovered a few clear differences that so books are often approached differently when it comes to embargoes and to license, and licenses are different as well. There's more leniency in that area. But I think a large part of it is just the perception. There is a perception that it is much more costly to produce open access books than it is to produce open access journals. There is a perception that it is much more complicated, that there are issues with rights, that there are issues with licenses. And I think also there is a perception it takes much longer to write a book, and projects often don't cover the period that it takes to write a book. So there are all these little complications, but I think another element there is that the humanities seem to be a bit farther removed from, let's say, practices in scientific practices, and so they have a different take on how they conduct their scholarship, and they are the important authors often of monographs, and so they feel a bit removed from the whole idea of open science. I think that's another element.
Great. So then if we acknowledge that books are somewhat different in a good way, perhaps, what do you think, so if we were to formulate or to recommend how a policy for books should look like, what are specific factors that are specifically connected to the fact that we're talking about books here that should be taken into consideration? Charles, maybe to you.
Yes. Well, there is an underlying assumption in the Plan S language that a publisher is purely a service provider. I do think one of the aspects of the different traditions in books that Elke refers to is that there are these professionally employed acquisitions editors who are responsible for book publishing in many places. So rather than a journal editor who may not be compensated and is an academic in the field, many monograph publishers have professionalized acquisitions editors who have been kind of brought up and trained and contribute as a particular group of professionals. And so really thinking about the role of the acquisitions editor and the percentage of cost of a book that is embedded in the work of the acquisitions editor, I think is really important, because it varies across publishers, but there is something precious in what acquisitions editors do and contribute to the health of the disciplines in which they publish. And it would be a shame to eradicate that. So more understanding of the role of the acquisitions editor and the variety of roles that they play would be useful, I think.
Wonderful. I haven't thought about that. That's really interesting to acknowledge the role that the acquisition editors actually play in the whole process here. Dominic, from your point of view, what kind of, are there any sort of particular issues of the policy that you would like to gain special attention from the point of view of an open science advisor based in Latin America?
Well, we are in a region where 2/3 of research are funded with public funds, and there's a very strong tradition of university presses. The region has not outsourced publishing books, academic books, so academic books are published by the universities and scientific societies. And we wish to see a global proposal for open access academic books, which concentrates on quality and informing quality as the directory of open access books, informing the process of peer review, informing the licenses, and protecting, because we ask for CC BY licenses, but we don't think about the reselling of open access contents in the bundle of subscriptions to paid services. So we are preparing open access contents to be sold by commercial providers. So we have to think of another license. We lack a new license to be CC BY compliant, but to avoid the commercialization of, imagine in Claxo we have 3,000 open access books. Why should those 3,000 open access books be part of a commercial agreement if we don't put non-commercial in the CC BY license? In our open access policies in Latin America, we have usually a 6-month embargo or 1-year embargo, but we need research. Excellent, your Excel sheet, I just looked at it. excellent work. We need that research in our region. But one very important point in our region is research assessment procedures do not include books. They concentrate on the prestige industry with impact factor. So at Claxo, we are promoting the review of those evaluation assessment procedures so that they include books. That will help very much the growth of books, of academic books in open access.
Right, thank you so much, Dominic. You mentioned, I like how you say that we need a new CC BY license or a special type of license for books. Elke, I would like to ask you from the point of view of an infrastructure provider. Are there any sort of particular issues with these specific lenses on to think of when it comes to a policy for OA books within the Plan S?
Thank you, Agatha. That's a good question. I think, I hope the policy will include measures to support implementation of the policy. Mm-hmm. And things that to think about, things like monitoring and compliance checking. You can imagine for the journal side, there is a journal checker tool. You can imagine something similar for books, a sort of a book checker tool. Mm-hmm. We are talking about what we call an open book watch to gather data, to gather usage data, price information, policy information, the numbers of output to see how the transition is taking place to OA. And I think that's also an important area to sort of help develop. And then I think there are two other areas that are closely tied to infrastructure. One is quality assurance and another discovery. So discovery seems a little bit strange because, of course, the books are free, they're on the internet, but actually making them easily discoverable is really a complicated job, and that's something where we should put more attention on as well.
Thank you, Elke. A question to all of you. Why do you think, because when I was going through all these policies, I was really struck by the fact that there are so many of them that really do not mention at all self-archiving. Why do you think that is? What's the difficulty there?
If I may, I think it has to do with culture. So book authors expect that a book is edited professionally, mm-hmm. and they will feel hesitant to make a manuscript which hasn't been edited available. So it also has to do with the whole process of producing a book. And once it's been edited and published, of course, then self-archiving is only possible within certain policies of the publisher, or when the book is made open access through a Gold OA.
I think this fits into a long-running question about the difference between a dissertation and a book, mm-hmm. and that's been very long-running as an issue, and it's come up when a lot of dissertations have been put into repositories, which they have, and the question is, how different is a dissertation from a monograph? And of course, the answer is that varies a huge amount depending on what publisher you're talking about. But university presses have made the point that in most cases, their versions of the book are very different from the dissertation. And the more reputable university presses have said, and that is why we don't care if the dissertation is made openly available. And it's really important that university presses can stand by that and provide convincing evidence that they have added a lot of value to the dissertation, that it's a completely different product when it's issued as a book. And I think in most cases, university presses can provide that. So it's just to say, I think there is, this is part of a longer running question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles. And we will be asking you in your breakout rooms, we will be asking you about dissertations and whether they should be within the scope of policy or out of it. Dominic, is there anything else that you would like to add here about
yes, thank you. I learned so much hearing Charles and Elke. In our region, dissertations, theses and dissertations have been one of the that adapted to open access more quickly and in repositories for theses. But university presses are much slower because they look at what happens in the repositories and they say, well, but we sell books and we have incomes and we need those incomes. So they were more resistant to put their books in open access, and it grows slower, but it is coming. But it's not thought as a BPC model. It's a subsidized model. Research communication is part of the research cost. So Latin America is not thinking about making a business with book publishing charges. And we would like to see that in any global plan. With the name that it has, they should consider, as we say that they should consider in journals, supporting the diamond infrastructures, not only providing APCs to the industry to help them transform. Any global plan should support infrastructures for publishing books with no book publishing charges as part of the cost of research, but investing in public infrastructure, in scholar-led initiatives, and in non-profit.
Thank you for this thought, Dominic. I think that I will try to narrow down our discussion now, because we talked in general about how a plan as for books could look like. Today, however, this session is devoted specifically to the policy scope question. So I would like to ask you, we've seen while I was giving you the overview of the existing policies, that it's a little bit all over the place, really. So we have these policies that mention OA monographs or OA books or academic books or and so on and so on. So what are your views on this lack of uniformity there? Do we actually need some kind of uniformity, or how would you like to proceed from this plethora of possibilities, pretty much? Charles, would you like to address this?
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting part of your research, Agatha, and it really points out, again, it sort of reveals something that we've been papering over for years, which is nobody actually knows what a monograph is, right? I mean, the definitions are extremely capacious, extremely slippery. I think it's really interesting. I think we probably need a better definition of what's in scope that's a bit more precise. However, I do have a concern about this question about precision versus sort of lack of precision, which is a lot is happening in the world of books in terms of development of new formats and multimedia rich outputs, book-like things which are audio first, text second. Lucy mentioned this in the chat. I mean, audio, video, etc. I think it's very important that any policy doesn't constrict that innovation and development. So the question of definition of what we're talking about here is really important, and your research has really shed light on that fact.
Great. Elke, what are your views on this? What is it that we're actually talking about today?
Yeah, I come back to the differences in approaches to book publishing in different countries. I think, for instance, in Germany, if you look at monographs, what is understood to be a monograph often is simply a properly published dissertation and not a lot of additional editing, or maybe even without any editing. And that's an accepted form. of output, of research output. And so, you know, you shouldn't sort of try and make that something that should be out of scope just because it's a dissertation originally and not a proper monograph according to definitions of, let's say, a university press in the UK or something. And I think the same is true if you look at regions in Latin America, for instance. So I'd say we shouldn't be too strict, and I very much like the definition that the European Research Council uses, which is long form publications, research output in long form. And that's a very vague term, and it also allows for innovative types of output that you know might be called a monograph, but actually only exist in digital form or something like that.
Great. Okay, so so I see that you are more for a gentler approach. Let me put it that way, and actually, in the end, an approach that allows some kind of innovation or some kind of gray zones to also be recognized. Dominic, what would you say to that?
Very interesting, Charles mentioning the innovations, and I saw in Copin so many innovations mentioned, and Elke about the definitions. In our case, in Latin America, we perceive that in the recommendations for open science policies of UNESCO, which are being drafted and looking for consensus, there we see an opportunity because bibliodiversity is much present, multilingualism is much present, conversation with social actors others than the academics are much present. So books are going to change as the journals have changed with preprint, with post-print review, with many things. I imagine that the books with the long, how did you say, Elke, the long
form publication.
Thank you so much, Elke. The long publishing will be redefined in an open science context, because we do not know what will happen in the interaction with the other social actors. In the case of Claxo, we have more than 5,000 researchers in our working groups, and 30% of the participants in the working groups are non-academics, are from social movements and policymakers. And we have to accept that many times the formats of the books Claxo publishes are different from what would be acceptable by the directory of open access books. So we have to deal with these changes in an open science context. It's new.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I think that we will have to park here because we are approaching our coffee break. And it's important to have some coffee before we actually put you in breakout rooms, where we will encourage you to discuss the question of how we should define the policy scope for open access books. So this will happen after the break, but for now, thank you so much. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Elke. Thank you, Dominic. I think it was a wonderful introduction that hopefully left everyone thirsty for some more discussion. You are more than welcome to go grab some coffee, stretch your legs, and please do come back in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, we will regroup here, and then Lucy will explain how we will proceed further to further discuss the policy scope for open access books. Thank you so much for now, and we will see each other in 10 minutes. Thank you. Goodness, I didn't see the chat when I was presenting. There is like a whole new discussion going on there. It's wonderful.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah. It's
I like
great.
this aspect of online sessions. It's one of those that's tricky to replicate in real life.
That's really great. Lucy, before you start with putting us into breakout rooms, I have a confession to make because I realized that I made a mistake in my presentation and I won't be able to sleep if I don't confess. So I think that by mistake, I said 14 months and embargo period for STM publications. Obviously, it was 24 months, not 14 months. So sorry, everyone. Feel better now.
I feel like you've got that off your chest. Do we think we have everyone back? Shall we begin?
I think so. Let's begin because this is the most exciting part of this event.
Yeah,
So.
the most exciting / logistically stressful. So welcome everyone. I hope you're all back refreshed from your coffee break. I'm just going to run through quickly the logistics of how we're going to manage the discussion sessions in the breakout room. Obviously the purpose of the breakout sessions is so that you can discuss and also note down your views on the scope of a Plan S policy for books. So there'll be some discussion, but also please make sure that there is some note taking because otherwise we have no record of the fascinating and insightful things that you will have said. So we're going to give you all Google Docs to use for the note taking aspect. And the completed documents are going to be held on the Open Access Books Humanities Commons site here for people to be able to come and consult them. And they will feed into a policy document, as I mentioned at the beginning, that will be created by Spark Europe and presented to Coalition S. So the raw materials, the notes will be available on the site, and they'll then be used to help shape this policy document. So then how the breakouts will work, we originally said groups of 7 to 8 people. I think because we've had a few people head off after the presentations, the groups will be slightly smaller, so that's good. Everybody's going to have a Google Doc, or each breakout room is going to have a Google Doc with questions to structure your discussions. So the questions are fairly simple. We sort of anticipate they'll be useful to help you shape your discussions, but of course, if you think we're missing something in the questions or there's other things you want to add, by all means, don't feel restricted by those sort of jumping off questions. And we suggest that when you get into the breakout room, the first thing that you do is to nominate a note taker or to agree that you'll all individually make contributions in the notes. However you want to do it is fine, but please establish that first before you start the discussion. And we also ask that you note down who's in the room. This is so that the feedback isn't completely anonymous. So if you want to give your name and your position, that's great. If you're not comfortable with quite that level of transparency, that's also fine. If you could then let us know just roughly your role if you're not comfortable with giving your name. So if you could say, you're a university press publisher, or you're a university librarian, or whatever it might be that your role is. And then in the discussion, you may find that you're coming to a consensus, which is great. If you find that you're not agreeing and there are certain things that you can't come to a shared view on, then that's totally fine. If you could note those down so we know what the different views were, that would also be really helpful. In terms of the practicalities of how we're going to manage this, we have an index document, which you can see the URL there, and I'm also about to drop it in the chat. And there you will see the individual documents are listed by breakout room number. So Toby is about to spirit us all the way into various breakout rooms. And when that happens, you'll see, as you can see on the slide here, you'll see a little notice to tell you which number breakout room you're being spirited off to. So when you arrive in your breakout room, if you can choose the numbered pad, which corresponds to your breakout room number. So I suggest opening that index document now if you haven't already, just so that you have access to it. And then when you land in your breakout room, if you can open the pad that corresponds to the breakout room number that you're in. In terms of logistical support, we have amazing facilitators. We have Toby Steiner, Tom Grady and Tom Mustard, who are all on the call. I don't know if you can if you can put your cameras on so everyone can see and just wave and say hello. I can see Toby. I can't see anybody else, but I will assume you're waving. And also Agata and I, we will sort of be circulating between the breakout rooms. So we'll appear every now and then just to make sure that everything's going fine, that you've got your pads, that everything's progressing as it should. And if your connection drops for any reason, you come out of the call, just click back onto the Zoom link, you'll come back to the main room, Toby will be there and he can reassign you to your breakout room. So there's the URL again, in case you need it, the index document with all the pads. And that is it. So let me know if you've got any questions before we disappear you all. I can't see any typing, so I'm going to assume everyone's fine and that's clear. So Toby, if you wouldn't mind, please, opening the breakout room.
All right.
Okay, we have more and more people coming back. I hope no one was left alone in the breakout room. That would be sad and lonely.
Now all are closed now.
Okay.
I'm always the last to go, and I was spat out. I wasn't given any grace to an isolation in there. I was firmly booted out like the people at the pub.
Were you still talking when?
Oh, I was still in mid flow.
Oh my goodness!
Nothing to stop Rupert.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that, Rupert, but yeah, we have to wrap up actually. So I hope you all had really great discussions. I had an honor to eavesdrop on 2 rooms, so it was going quite well. Very different discussions in these 2 rooms, which was also quite interesting. But this is exactly what we were looking for the diversity of voices. Unfortunately, there are too many of us to ask each group to tell us exactly what you discussed, but just to get a feel of what was going on in your rooms, we prepared a poll. It's just 1 question, and I would love you to answer the question. So I hope that I launched it now. So the question is very simple. So which publication types should fall within the scope of a Plan S policy for books? And you have monograph, edited collection, chapter, trade book, textbook, PhD thesis. Please go ahead and vote. It's a multiple choice, so you can vote for all of them, some of them, whatever your heart desires. So I will end the poll in about a minute or so, and then I will share your results. It's quite interesting so far. We have 100% for monograph, 100 for edited collection. There isn't that much consensus with trade book, textbook, PhD thesis. These are still problematic. Okay, I will end the poll now and share the results with you. Hope you can all see them. So here is, okay, so interesting. So 100% for chapter. So chapters should be within the scope, apparently. 97% for monograph and edited collections, 69 for PhD thesis, and not that much support for textbooks, only 47%. And trade books, also apparently not that many people think that they should be in, so only 34% for trade books. Quite interesting. Thank you so much for these results here. I guess that gives us a little bit, at least, of a taste of what your conversations were about. Dominic, I see that you're saying that there were very interesting perspectives and discussions in room 2. I'm very happy to hear that, and I hope that other rooms also enjoyed the discussions they had. I will hand over to Lucy now for a wrap-up, and she will explain what it is that we're going to do next from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Agata, and thanks, everybody. So just to kind of wrap up from here. As I mentioned, we're going to now share all of the docs that we have all produced in the breakout sessions, and they're going to be shared on the Open Access Books Network Humanities Commons forum. You can see the link there. I'm finding that I can't copy it from my slide, which is annoying, so I don't know if it's possible for someone else to drop it in the chat. But it's in the Open Access Books Network Humanities Commons site. So we're going to post the recording from the first part of today's session there. We're going to post links to all of the notes from today's session. And we're also going to put an open notes doc there, which will be open for 2 more weeks. So the intention is that if anybody wasn't able to make the session but are interested to contribute, they can do that via that doc. And also if anyone here has additional things that they want to include, then you can go and you can do that via the Open Access Books Network Humanities Commons group. And also in the future, if there's a session, for example, if you didn't get a ticket to the Green OA session, which is sold out now, we'll do the same thing for each session. So you'll be able to go there and see the videos and the notes and to contribute on another notes doc. So these are those future sessions. You can see the timetable there, and at the bottom there is a link again to the Open Access Book Network Voices page. And I've just figured out how I can share the link. There we go. So yeah, so you can book there for future sessions. And just finally, a bit of a plug for the Open Access Books Network. So we have a website, which I shared earlier. There's our Humanities Commons group, which you can join for free, and it's very easy. There's a post on there that you can look at to find out how to do that. We also have a mailing list, which we encourage you to sign up for. This is a new list which we've developed, and on that we're going to share details of future events, any interesting blog posts that we publish. Basically, it's another way to kind of keep up with what the network is doing. And we're on Twitter as well, at OA Books Network, so you can follow us on there. And as I mentioned, everything that we do, it's free, and we want it to be open to as many people as possible, whether that's publishers, librarians, researchers, students, anyone that uses open access books and wants to find out more about them. On the Humanities Commons group as well, you'll find discussion boards, so you can post questions and have conversations about OA books. There is a calendar, an open calendar, so you can post if you know about an event which is happening, which is related to OA books. There's a blog, and there's also a sort of repository of files, so reports or papers or publications which are relevant to open access books are stored and uploaded there. So that is my final plug for the OABN. Thank you very much to everyone for coming. Thank you very much to our speakers for their insights. Thank you to the facilitators for helping us keep the show more or less on the road. And yeah, thanks everyone. I hope to see you at future sessions.
Thank you, everyone. And if I can ask our facilitators to stay on the call, just so that we can discuss how it went. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.